This is Join Us in France, episode 413, 413. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel to France. But today there won't be any news related to travel to France because I'm still on vacation. Back with more news next week. Today, I bring you a trip report with Callie Spinney about her trip to Brittany and Paris. If you're thinking of going to the Mont Saint-Michel, you must listen to this one. Like all trip reports, this one is full of tips and suggestions from someone who was just there and has wonderful first-hand recommendations for you. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my itinerary consult service and my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the VoiceMap app. You can browse all of that at my boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. Like I mentioned, I'm still on vacation. I'll be back with a report about my trip to Tennessee next week, but I want to thank the people who became patrons of the show in the last couple of weeks. Patrons get several exclusive rewards, but most people become patrons because they enjoy this podcast every week and they want it to continue, which is much appreciated. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been patrons for a long time. You are wonderful. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Barbara S. Wolf, Christina Leach, Lindley Hine, Linda Burke, Gloria Ironwood, and Bill Verdery. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. And thank you, Brian Sumner, for upgrading your donation to a yearly pledge. When you do that, you save a little bit of money, and it's great for me because I know I have your support for a whole year. Merci beaucoup. I'll record a video for my patrons next week, and I think I'll talk about some of the notes I took while in Tennessee about things that I saw that's kind of surprised me. Every time I go to America, I'm surprised. It's been so many years since I've lived there that it surprises me. Next week, I will also email the folks who are signed up for the 2023 France Boot Camp, which is sold out, by the way. I still get people emailing me about that. It's sold out. So back to work and my regular schedule next week. Next week on the podcast, it'll be an episode with Elise Riven of Toulouse Guided Walks about the famous painter Berthe Morisot and what an interesting life she had. But right now, let's talk about Brittany and Paris with Callie. Bonjour, Callie Spinney, and welcome to Join Us in France. Welcome back, I should say.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you. And today we're going to talk about your experiences in Brittany and Paris. And you were just there recently, right?
Yeah, in July of 2022.
And you hadn't been to France in a few years.
Correct. Yeah. The last time I was there was in 2017.
Wow. Okay. And this time you decided to go to Brittany and Paris. So we're going to talk about your favorite activities first. And then if there's time, we'll just do the rundown of how things work together, Okay. But I like that you put the Mont Saint-Michel at the top of your list. I want to hear why.
Well, what's funny is me and my friend were supposed to go in 2017, but we didn't get it together to plan the trip from Paris. And so this time I was going to visit my cousin and I was like, we have to do this. And it was such an interesting experience. I mean, it's gorgeous, obviously, but it's just such a wonderful place. I mean, it kind of reminded me of, this is silly, but Harry Potter World when I had visited that. It was just so picturesque when you're walking on I don't even know if it's called a street, but like the little alley, with the shops on the other side. It was so lovely and cute. And it was nice too, because, when we were walking around, there were the monks talking about things. And because I was in Brittany, the nice thing about being outside of Paris is people spoke French back to me. So that was really neat. The gentleman explained one of the chapels to me, and I asked him to repeat himself more slowly, and he did, and rather than switching to English, which is what would normally happen in Paris.
Yeah. You had good weather?
Yeah, it was warm when we were there, but it was lovely. I thought it was quite nice, especially in Brittany was nicer. It was more cool than Paris was. I just loved the Mont Saint Michel because it was a little bit, even though I knew it was there, it still seemed unexpected. I mean, I can't imagine what it was like building that thing. To get all the building materials there and then to build on that and dealing with, the tide coming in and out. I can't imagine what that was like.
They were really, their brains were the same way as ours. And it's really important to remember that they were just like us, had the same aspirations and the same feelings and desires. And they were probably blown away when they pulled up with their horse to the Mont Saint Michel.
I know. It was just so interesting. I mean, it was really funny because we were there in the summertime. So they had a nighttime exhibit sort of thing set up. We weren't there in the evening, but they had these almost cartoonish sort of cutout in different places. And I couldn't figure, I was like, this is kind of bizarre. It seems kind of tacky. But then I realized later it was part of the light exhibit that would happen once the sunset. There were these giant fireplaces, on either end of a room, but there was this cutout of a fire inside of it. And I just thought it was a little bizarre. I was like, do they think people can't figure out what this is without that? But then I was like, oh, okay. They turn the lights on after the sun goes down. And it must have been really neat to see that. But I couldn't figure it out at first of the daytime what these bizarre cartoonish things were around the different areas of the mall.
So people always wonder, where should I stay? Where should I sleep? Where should I eat? So tell us about the details about how you did that.
Well, we probably did it in a way that I wouldn't necessarily recommend because we drove to the mall from Karnak. So we left Karnak that morning. We went to the mall. We did our visit. And then we drove to St. Malo for the evening. So we didn't stay in the area. We traveled pretty quickly in the first part of our trip. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because we just wanted to be in every place a little bit longer. The town that we drove through and everything looked adorable. And I think it probably would have been nice to be on the mall after most of the tourists left because it was quite crowded.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. I saw people who were using, different mobility devices. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to climb up all those steps. And we didn't eat there either. We got ice cream, but I can't really give much advice for, a good restaurant or where to stay overnight because we didn't stay in that area.
Right. So you just stayed long enough, but you did go into the Abbey?
Yes. I think we got there in the morning. We ended up having a late lunch nearby. It was kind of we were there for a couple of hours, I would say, because I forget what it was, but there was one section closed for renovation. So we didn't get to see everything there was. But we climbed all up. Other than that, we went in the Abbey, we went in the chapel, we saw the little graveyard, the little cemetery that's there. It was all gorgeous and beautiful. I mean, the scale of it, you can't, it's hard to conceptualize until you're actually there.
Yeah, it's very large and very beautiful. And you're right, people go up, even though it's difficult, it's steep. I don't recommend people try to pull suitcases up to the hotels up there because it's really not easy, but it can be done. People do it all the time. It's not my preference. But yes, staying until later in the evening, or the way I recommend people do it is that they stay at one of the hotels that's just off of the mall. It's not very far. It's 1.5 kilometers. It's like Disneyland. They have a hotel row, with all the hotels all in a row and a bus that drops you off right in front of the hotels. And it's a free shuttle that runs all the time. So if you're staying at one of those hotels, you can park your car and then you take the shuttle, go see the mall in the day, and at night you can go back after people have left, and you can see it from a distance too, which is really nice, I think. Yeah.
I think that would have been great. That would have been great if we had done that.
One more quick question about the Mont Saint Michel. As I recall, there weren't very many signs inside of the Abbey. Is it still like that?
Correct. Yes.
All right. Tell me about visiting Saint-Malo, because that was your second favorite thing.
Yes. Oh, and it was Saint-Malo. I wanted to go to Saint-Malo. Hilariously, in my head, I confused Mont Saint-Michel and Saint-Malo all the time just because they're similar names. I know that they're different, but for some reason, I said to my cousin initially, "Oh, I want to go to Saint-Malo," and then I was like, "No, I was like, I would like to go there, but this is the other thing I want to do." So we kind of had a little bit of a backtrack journey, but from All the Light We Cannot See, but it was exactly what you would picture. I mean, such a cute little place, the walled city and everything. It was kind of funny because we had taken the train there and I had to call and hire a taxi in French, which was interesting. But, they drove us right into the city, very narrow streets, but they got us pretty close to our hotel. And it was so interesting because it was like stepping back in time. Because all the roads were the cobblestone, the buildings were close together. I mean, you could tell that the interior or the places have been renovated. So they were modern. Our hotel was quite nice, but it was unreal because after we had dinner that night, we went off on the ramparts to walk around. But it was so charming to stand there and be able to, you're walking around, you're just seeing down this road and down this road and down this road. And it was like stepping back in time. Because it looked I imagine very much like it must have 100 years ago. And it was just gorgeous. We got up on the ramparts and we walked around to the ocean side and just seeing the ocean spread out there. I mean, it must be such a wonderful place to live. I mean, they must have gorgeous sunsets, just every single evening.
Yeah, probably.
And it was really neat because there were, places right down on the beach that were playing live music and everything. So it seemed like a really fun, charming place and nicely compact too, because, we walked around to the opposite side of the ramparts and then we just cut back to our hotel and it still didn't take very much time. And there was definitely a tourist area where there were lots of restaurants and shops, but then there were also residential areas that were very separate and distinct. So it was a really nice, compact little place. I thought it was adorable. I wish we could have spent more time there again, like everywhere.
Yeah, that's, when I do itineraries with people, they always start by telling me all the places they want to visit on this trip. And I'm always careful to say, okay, there's a lot more you could do in this area, but obviously you want to move on, right? And they just need to be
you have
told.
to make choices.
Yeah, they just have to be told that. Because I guess in the US, at least in the Western US where I've lived, well, once you've seen the 2 or 3 things that are interesting, you move on. There's nothing else, right? But in France, it's not really like that. Every place you look, there's something different and interesting. So you could really stay in a place like Saint-Malo for, I don't know, a week and not do all the things that locals enjoy in that area, You could do some hikes.
Yes, I would definitely recommend people, eat the thing that the place is known for. As Brittany, eat the seafood, right?
Yeah.
My cousin got mussels when we were in Saint-Malo and he couldn't even finish. It was well over 100 mussels that they served to him. It was like a marathon for him to eat through this bowl that they gave him. They had to take away a bowl of shells and bring him another empty bowl. It was unreal how much they served him.
Right. So enjoy the stuff that local people like. Yeah. Mussels and fries are nice. Very nice. All right. Well, then your next favorite thing was the catacombs, which are in Paris. So now we're leaving Brittany and going back to Paris. Tell me what you thought of the catacombs.
So last time we didn't do this because I was just like, oh, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of dead people. But I've learned a little bit more about it since then. And so I was like, okay, I really want to go. And it was just really awe-inspiring. And it was also nice because it was so hot in Paris when we were there and it was nice and cool underground.
Yes, an excellent point. Yes. Yeah, caves and churches are good when it's hot out.
Yeah, but it was very awe-inspiring and just, it was just an interesting thing because you look and you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, these are for a bunch of bones. But then it's like, how many people are buried in here? I mean, I don't even know if there's a number figure even available, but it was very sobering to think about how many people were down there. And, and it's funny too, because there are some areas where things were very laid out really nicely, and they made a cross with skulls or different things like this. And then there's other places in the catacombs where, there were the bones stacked up, and then it just seemed like there were a bunch just dumped on the top.
Hmm. They didn't quite finish.
Right. But it was so fascinating and interesting. And I thought that people did a good job of being pretty reverent about the fact that, these folks were laid to rest. But it's such an interesting part of history. And we really enjoyed it. I just thought it was a very unique thing. It was, of all the places I've traveled to, I haven't been in anything quite like that. So it was a very unique experience. Again, mobility issues. My mom was talking about going, and I was like, Mom, just know that there are a lot of stairs.
Yes.
They're straight up, there's no landing. You can rest, I guess, on the side, but it's a pretty narrow space.
Yeah. And they want you to keep moving because they can only have so many people on the stairs at once. And there's always a lot of people waiting to go down, and they can only let one person in when one person exits. And so, yeah, they want you to keep moving. If you have bad knees, don't do this.
Yeah. And they do have a turnstile too. It's really interesting. So they literally know, okay, one person left. Now one more person can come in.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's for safety purposes. So you had bought your tickets ahead of time, I suppose?
Yeah. And they only sell tickets, I think, 7 days in advance. So that was something we had to set a reminder for ourselves that we had to purchase them. The audio guide, I can't remember if we paid extra for that or not, but it was really well done. So I definitely thought that was worth it as well.
Yeah, it's very important to remember that in France, they rarely sell tickets very far ahead. They like to sell within a week, perhaps 2, 3, but rarely more than that. And that's because if you sell further away, you're going to have to deal with returns and people changing their minds and whatever. So it's easier to just say, hey, if you want tickets, come a week before, and that's it. And hopefully, if it's a week before, you really mean this. You're really coming instead of, I want to go next year. Yeah, let me get a ticket. So if you see that tickets are not available, think that perhaps it's because they're not available yet. It's not that it's sold out. It's that you have to go back in a few days. And you do have to set reminders for those sorts of things. Otherwise, you're not going to get the tickets that you want.
Yeah, and I did it on my phone. So it was relatively easy to purchase online. I wouldn't want people to think that they have to lug their laptop over or anything like that. We were able to easily take care of it on our phones.
Yeah, whenever you can use apps or have your ticket in your phone, it's easier and faster for everybody instead of, let me look through 10 papers. I printed out all these tickets. That's 10 years ago. We've moved on.
Right.
All right. The Rodin Museum is next. That's also in Paris.
Yeah. And another thing that I didn't do the last time I visited, I am not a huge art person. I'm one of those people that I'm just like, oh, yes, this is nice. I'm not like Elise. I don't know a lot of history and background for things. One thing I was really fascinated by was that, I didn't realize that the Thinker wasn't its own thing necessarily. The Thinker is part of, what is it? The Gates of Hell? Is that the name of the piece?
Yes, there's a whole progression of pieces, and I don't know enough about them to tell you, what order they're in. But the Gates of Hell are straight across from the Thinker, perhaps maybe 20 yards away or something, 30 yards away.
And I had no idea. I had just known the Thinker as its own piece. And I had no idea that it was a larger recreation of one of the figures on the Gates of Hell. And it was really interesting to see that throughout the museum, there were different pieces. It's like, this is taken from this, and now it's just a little bit bigger. So it was fascinating to see the different impact of pieces, created at different scales. And there was another piece. It was the 5 gentlemen giving over the keys to the city.
Yeah, the merchants of Calais or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But it was very funny because when you're listening to the audio guide, it tells you to walk around the pieces, but it was something that my cousin and I instinctually started to do.
Yeah.
And then the audio guide was like, to really take this in, you need to walk around. And we just started laughing at each other because we were like, well, yes, you do.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great museum. It's one that takes perhaps 2 hours. Is that about how long you spent there, do you think?
Yes. And I will say that I was surprised how warm it was inside the museum, at least in the US. It seems like museums are always over air conditioned. but there it was not.
Mm.
It was quite warm, even inside the museum, which I was surprised.
Was it air conditioned at all?
It did not seem like it.
Okay.
I don't think it was. So that's something to note. That one was a little rough because there's a lot of stuff outside. So potentially not a thing to necessarily do in the middle of a heat wave, but whatever. That's what we had planned. So that's what we did.
You can never plan heat waves. Unfortunately, these days it seems like July and August are pretty much. This year was horrible. It just went on and on. And it's just now that it's cooling off some. And even during the day, today in the day, it's 90. And then tomorrow it's supposed to start raining. And anyway, it's just, weather has been, it's just changing, okay? It's just not what we're used to, and it's a bit of a problem for obvious reasons. Yeah, so the Rodin Museum is nice. Did you eat at the museum? There's a little cafe and stuff. Okay.
We did not. There was also, it looked like they were setting up for some sort of fashion show or something in the back of it when we were there. So we did not eat there. And I would also, just a reminder for folks to check when they're closed, because we tried to go, we tried to go on a day that they were closed. It might have been a Monday or a Sunday.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head when the Rodin is closed. It might be a Monday or a Tuesday. Not a Sunday, but Monday or Tuesday, probably.
Yeah, so just a reminder for folks to when you're planning to do that, because I knew that. And I had even put on our plan closed on X day. But I think once we got on the ground, I lost my mind a little bit.
You lost your mind. Oh. Yeah. And the Rodin Museum is not far from Les Invalides, Napoleon's tomb, and also not very far from the Eiffel Tower for people who are trying to sort out what they're going to do on different days. If you're in that area, you might as well see those two other things as well that same day, if you haven't seen them before, obviously.
Right. And this was honestly, the Cluny was closed last time I was in Paris. Kind of had it in the back of my head that I wanted to go there. And we honestly kind of stumbled, because I stayed in the fifth last time I see. So I was kind of walking my cousin around and showing him different things. And we honestly kind of stumbled on the Cluny. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the place I was interested in going. Would you want to go? So we went at the end of the day. We did a very quick visit. I really wanted to see the Lady in the Unicorn. So we were there kind of at the end of the day. And I had no idea that it was more than one piece. I thought the Lady and the Unicorn to me was one piece. And I was like, oh no, it's 6 different tapestries. So that was really neat for me. Clearly, I am not a history buff because I didn't know that.
Well, but you knew that the Lady and the Unicorn was in the Cluny Museum. You're far ahead of most people.
What's fascinating? I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like to, I mean, how do you design something that big? You know, it's just, I've done a little bit of needlepoint, and that's, a big undertaking. I'm like, I don't even know how you would go about creating something like that.
It's a very large piece, and it's a set, and they represent different, I think it's human emotions is what they represent.
Senses. It's the 5 senses.
Yes.
And then the 6th one is supposed to be your greatest heart's desire or something like that.
Which, who knows what that is?
Right. They don't say what that is. The one thing I will say is that, because there's like the different exhibits and there's different rooms off it, they started closing the rooms off half an hour before the museum shut.
Yeah.
So there was one room at the very end that we didn't get to because of that. So I would say if you're going at the end of the day and you really want to see, the Lady and the Unicorn or some other piece, go see that first. And that way, if you miss out on something, you won't be heartbroken, because they want you to have time to go to the gift shop before you leave.
Yeah, there's that. And also that they just want to empty out the rooms, make sure nobody's left in the museum by the time it's closing time. And that takes some time. So usually half an hour before closing, they won't even sell you a ticket. And they will definitely try to, usher people out by, 20 minutes before closing, and they close rooms and stuff like that. So yes, don't go at the last minute. It's not as good of an experience. So if you decide, but I mean, it sounds like you just happened to be there and you saw it and you knew what it was and you were like, oh, let's go there, So you hadn't really planned on it. It's better if you say, okay, for this day, I want to see this neighborhood and go into this church and perhaps this museum. and then, you're sure to be there in plenty of time. So you hadn't seen the Cluny before. You don't know what it looked like before.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you liked the redesign, but obviously, since you didn't see it before, you don't know. But it's a nice museum, right? I mean, it's nicely done, and it was air conditioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, not to the degree that we would expect in an American place, but it was cooler compared to the Rodin.
So now we're going back to Brittany and the standing stones in Carnac. And tell us about that.
Yeah, that was interesting. I had told my cousin that I like to look at, culture and history and things like that. And I didn't even know that these standing stones existed until he told me about it. So it was, and he lives in Ireland, in Dublin. So he was all about these standing stones because they have, kind of things like that all over there. And Carnac is just an adorable little place. It's like a seaside town. We had a really nice hotel that was right by the beach. I mean, you just cross the street and you were at the beach. So I imagine that this must be a place that is just, lots of people like to go to for a seaside.
Oh, yeah.
Just excursion.
Remember the name of the hotel?
It was La Diana, I think.
Okay.
And one thing I will warn folks about, because we got twin rooms everywhere, but the twin rooms often had the beds literally right next to each other. I mean, I could have rolled from my bed directly onto his. It was hilarious because, we had our two cousins traveling around. It was almost like we were sharing a double bed half the time. So just to forewarn people, that's what a twin bedroom was like in France.
Yeah, they often don't split them because there's an awful lot of couples who think that their partner moves too much. And if it's actually a double bed pushed together, you don't feel the movement as much.
Right. Yeah, but it was a very lovely hotel. We got there before we were able to check in, and they took our bags for us. We had a lovely little lunch, and then we had rented e-bikes to do a tour around of the standing stones because they're spread out over quite a large area. And we ended up having to, kind of have a leisurely lunch before we got our bikes because they were on their lunch break. And, French people take more than 30 minutes for their lunch break. So we went back after we eat and we got our e-bikes. It was not as organized as we thought it was going to be. We thought we were kind of going to get a map, telling us, oh, go here, then here. And they literally just kind of gave us our bikes and told us to have fun. So
you did.
So that was a little, yes, we did. And so he put in Google Maps into his phone to help us navigate around a little bit. So we were flying by the seat of our pants a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're going to rent bikes, probably, for bicycles, you can get one of those carriers that you put on your handlebars that'll hold your phone and you can see your phone. That would be a good thing to bring with you because it weighs nothing. Maybe I'll just add that to my list of travel favorites that I keep. Yeah, that would be a good thing to add because I recommend people rent e-bikes a lot, but you never know if they don't give you a map. What are you going to do? Use Google Maps. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And he had his phone in his pocket talking to him. So that's how we found our way around. It was very funny because he thought I was taller than I actually am. And I don't ride a bike very frequently. He does. So I almost crash landed into his backside at one point and ended up with a quite lovely set of bruises down my leg. But I was fine. It was fine.
So the frame of your bike was too big?
Yeah, it was a little bit too big. And I had never used an e-bike before. So it was a little bit of trial and error to figure out how to use it. But it's fun. Once I got the hang of it, I was just like, this is the way to go because, it gives you a little assistant. So definitely, if you're not a natural athlete, you can still make it work with this because it powers you a little bit. But it was very neat. There was, like a 2,000-year-old church that we visited, and there was a lovely little hotel right next to it. I was like, oh, well, this is the place to be. It's so funny to me in France. You'll come upon places that are just right next to something that is, over 1,000 years old. And it's just a little bit mind-blowing for me as someone living in the United States, where there is pretty much nothing around that's 1,000 years old, let alone, you can rent a hotel right next to something like that.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. These standing stones are older than Stonehenge to give people in a little bit of idea of a time scale. And as far as I understand it, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot in that podcast where you're going to talk about this, but as far as I know, they don't know why they're there, but it was obviously very intentional. I mean, it stretches out over kilometers and they're taller on one end and shorter on another. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to get some big rocks and stand them up and all willy-nilly. Or, I mean, over the course of kilometers, these stones get gradually smaller and smaller and smaller. I just can't even imagine what it must have been like to plan it out and move things around.
They planned it all.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And they had to have quite the setup to move the stones. I mean, it's doable, but if you give me, okay, your project is to move 1,000 stones in a line over there. I'm like, oh, I could, but it'd be hard work.
Right. And it's just like, it's unbelievable too. It's like, oh, you put this one in the wrong place. Now you got to move it again.
I hope they didn't do that too many times.
I hope so too. Goodness gracious.
You visited Merlin's tomb and the Fountain of Youth? I need the Fountain of Youth.
It's very funny. And I hope I send you one of these pictures. The Fountain of Youth looked like it would be the Fountain of Death these days because it was all like algae and muck and lots of bugs around. And this was out in the middle of the French countryside. And I don't know how my cousin found this, but this was on the way from Karnak to Mont Saint Michel. It took us maybe an extra 20 minutes to go to this place. And it was literally out in the middle of nowhere. I think there were less than 10 people around. So we just sort of parked and walked in, and you saw Merlin's tomb first. Someone had left a burning candle there, and I'm from California, so all I could think of was wildfire. But it was lovely. And then you walk through and there was someone, but I don't know if they were filming or recording. They were recording something there, this small group. So I don't know what that was about, but the Fountain of Youth really looked like you would catch some sort of disease if you drank out of it. These days, I'm hoping it was cleaner at some point in history.
You think you sent me a photo? Let's see.
I might not have. And if not, I can send it to you because it really looks like something that would give you giardia or something if you drank out of it.
Yeah, don't drink out of it.
But it almost looked like the signs were kind of just like, if you were out hiking, it would be like, oh, turn off here to go to this waterfall. That was the kind of scale of these signs.
I'll try to find where it is and put it in the show notes. We'll see if I'm as resourceful as your cousin.
Yeah, and then there was a really small town nearby we ate at this really cute place called the Excalibur. And it was one of the nicer meals we had. And it was very simple. There was like a fireplace in there that they were grilling things on. It was very charming. And it was a tiny little town where we hardly had GPS reception. There were like 3 different places, but it was very charming to see. I mean, it was just truly a village. I can't imagine if there's more than a few hundred people living in that area.
All right. Okay. Now let's get to, you had to go to a pharmacy because you had some problem with your toe, something or other.
Yeah. And I discovered when I got home, it was an ingrown toenail. And that was why it was giving me problems. When we entered France, we flew into Nantes. And so that evening I had to wander into a pharmacy and try to talk to a pharmacist about what was going on with my toe. And again, we're outside of Paris. So her instinct wasn't just to speak English back to me. So it was a little bit my broken French and her broken English. We were able to communicate and it was amazing. It was, something that definitely worked better than what I had been using in the United States. And it was just like some vial of antibiotics that I just stuck my toe right into. But it was hilarious. The two of us kind of miming. I was trying to figure out how to communicate that I wanted Epsom salt to soak it. And she was not understanding what I was saying, but I got something that worked. But it was so neat. I was just like, why, in the US, I couldn't consult with a pharmacist like that and have them help me with things. So I was very thankful that French pharmacies are a little bit different than American ones.
They do a very nice job. For little things like that, they do a really good job. And they will just look at it and just suggest something. If they think you're crazy and it's all in your head, then they'll suggest some homeopathy or something because they know that won't hurt you. So that's your sign. If they sell you homeopathy, they didn't buy whatever you were complaining about.
I mean, she was very kind. She definitely, it wasn't just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. It was it wasn't great that I had to deal with it, but it was a nice experience that I was able to get what I needed.
I've had problems with stuff like that on my fingers, and they usually sell you a thing it's like an alcohol or something, and you stick your finger in it and you leave it in there for a long time. And I don't know what it is, but it helps.
Yes. Yep. It worked for me. It got me through. So I was able to keep, because obviously you're on vacation, you want to be walking a lot. And so I was able to keep on my feet the whole trip until I got home.
Have a little thing of Neosporin in your bag because you never know.
Yeah.
It's good to have. All right. Did I forget anything, or did we get through all of your wonderful experiences?
Yes, we got through all the top things.
That's wonderful. And so the way you work this out is we don't have a lot of time, but let's go through it quickly. You landed in Nantes.
Yes, we landed in Nantes, and we really wanted, because I had seen you visited the elephant, and I really wanted to go to that. But so I flew right after, the airlines were just kind of melting down at this point. And so I flew right after the 4th of July. And when I was leaving the US, the night before, it was on the news, hundreds of flights canceled out of San Francisco. So it was just like, great. So anyway, we were delayed getting out of Dublin into Nantes. So we're not able to visit the elephant, which I was sad about. But so we flew into Nantes. We kind of walked around the city that evening. I visited the cathedral. We went to L'Entrecôte for dinner.
Yeah.
Which I was excited about because you had talked about it so many times. And I was just we literally just stumbled upon it, and there was a line. I was just like, yep, we only have 10 minutes to wait till they open. Let's get in line and we'll go. And we were only in Nantes overnight. So it was really too bad. So we picked up our car the next morning to drive to Carnac. So we drove to Carnac. We got in around lunchtime, like I said, and we did the Standing Stones in the afternoon. We had a lovely dinner where we had crepes, savory and sweet crepes and cider for dinner. Again, like I said, I always try to eat the thing that a place is known for. So that was really great. And then we left the next morning and we drove from Carnac. We visited the Mont Saint Michel. So we visited that. And then we drove to Saint Malo for the evening. We spent the evening in Saint Malo. But again, we left the next morning. So we didn't get to see nearly as much as I would have liked.
Yeah, that was fast.
Very fast. It was great that we got to see so many things, but it was a little bit too fast for me. It would have been nice if we could have spent, 2 nights. Or, because we spent so much time in the car, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that.
Yeah, it's a long way. Brittany is big.
It is. It's relatively compact as far as I'm concerned, comparing it to California. Again, if you're on vacation and you really want to see and experience things, because that was the more enjoyable part for me, was being able to really see a different part of France and really get because the people were lovely. They were so friendly, and they worked with me with my French skills. It was too bad that we had to move as quickly as we did, but whatever. That was, we worked with the time we had.
Very good.
Yeah. And then we took the TGV to Paris, which was kind of funny because we had to change at some point. We got on the wrong train because it was only like 10 minutes for us to transfer. But it ended up working out because we talked to a conductor on the way and they got us seats so we were able to sit down. But I think that there were 2 trains leaving at the same time and we got on the wrong one.
Yeah.
So we're like, we're looking for this car, and it didn't exist on our train.
Right. You got to look for the train number. That happens a lot, that 2 trains leave at the same time or close to the same time, 3-4 minutes apart. And you think, oh, that's got to be my train. No, you got to look at your train number.
Yeah. And because it was so tight and we had our bag, I think we lost our minds a little bit. We were concerned about not missing the train. And so we're just like, whatever, we'll get on it, figure out which one's our car. We probably should have talked to a conductor when we initially got on, and we might have been able to work it out. But whatever, they got us seats and it all worked out in the end. Good. But it was a little bit of it was our own fault. And that was our only major hiccup.
Right. So we'll end on this. If you get into a pickle on a train, go talk to the conductor. If you are proactive and go talk to them, they're going to be super nice to you and help you any way they can. So yeah, go talk to them. Don't sit somewhere stupid and wait for them to come to you, because it doesn't work. They get mad at you if you do that.
Yeah, and I think they gave us better seats. I think we ended up, in a first class seat because that was what they had available for us. So it worked out in our favor.
All right. So we didn't get to talk about everything that you sent me, but obviously, just like for all the other episodes, there's going to be a guest notes part
Yes.
on the show notes where you can read all of this. You have advice about the Revolut app, some discussion about an eSIM through Orange. That's also very good. Doing a Google Sheet for your trip planning. Anyway, so that's all great stuff, and you can read it in the guest notes. Thank you so much, Callie. It was fun to talk to you, and I'm glad you had another wonderful trip to France. You keep coming back.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
why they keep getting better.
Exactly.
All right. Merci.
Au revoir.
The Join Us in France travel podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2022 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.